Welcome to the Podium Pod, the Pick and Rolls National Basketball Podcast. As we continue Paris 2024, I'm Adam Webster, and today joined once again by two of our pick and roll analysts. Firstly, my friend Tom Hersz.
Hi, Adam. How you going?
Not well. And secondly, Daniel Herborn. Daniel, how are you?
I'm okay. Good to be here, Adam, Tom. But yeah, not the conversation we expected to be having, is it?
This is just the opposite, Tom, of what we spoke about yesterday. I'll start with you. The Opals just lost their opening game of the 2024 Paris Olympics to Nigeria, 75-62. That is not a result that anyone predicted going in. It's a Cinderella story for Nigeria in comparison to the Opals, who are top 5 in the world. Nigeria 12th. They're no slouch, of course, but we expected the difference between the Opals and Nigeria to be far more pronounced than it was. We expected the Opals to go in and clinically take care of business, just as they did against China twice in Melbourne, but it wasn't to be.
No, and this was a case of one team really dictating the way this game was played. Aside from probably those first 3 or 4 minutes where the Opals looked really good and they led by 8 early, Nigeria made a quick adjustment early on and really tightened up their defense and their ball pressure. And from then on, they really controlled the tempo of this game. They set the tone, the physicality they brought, their interior defense as well. There was nothing easy for the Opals in the paint for most of the game. And they took the Opals very much out of their comfort zone, and they never really found it aside from a few little spurts here and there in the second half. And this is a shocking result to a team that didn't win a game in the Tokyo Olympics, Nigeria. And all the expectations on the Opals coming in that this was going to be the easiest of their 3 pool games. But they looked like a team that was rusty. They looked like a team that didn't have much preparation time, and it showed. And we were talking just before we came on air about how once Nigeria kind of took the Opals out of that comfort zone, there was no plan B. There was no adjustments really, and it was an uphill battle from then on. Credit, they've kind of fought back and got back within 2 points, but still Nigeria had all the answers and down the stretch just put it away. And that 13-point margin is really going to come back to bite the Opals later on, unless they can somehow win these next 2 games and give themselves a chance, because they're at real risk of not advancing through to the knockout stage right now.
Daniel, you've wrote countless articles on pickandroll.com.au covering these players, and you know them extremely well. They weren't ready for the physicality. They weren't ready for Nigeria's defensive intensity. And it struck me that they didn't seem to have a plan B. They didn't really know how to adjust. I mean, were you as shocked as everyone else to see that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is one of the most surprising Opals results in recent memory. I was looking at the bookmakers before the game, and I think we were 24.5-point favourites. I think most of us here kind of expected it to run basically along those lines. But apart from the 6-0 run the Opals had at the start and that good period, kind of late third quarter, early fourth quarter, Nigeria really dictated the tempo of the game. They were far more physical. And just a lot of out-of-character mistakes by the Opals. Free throw shooting was pretty appalling. I think 44% for the night. And just so many turnovers. Some of that was down to Nigeria's physicality, their intensity, the pace that they played at. But there's also a lot of unforced turnovers. It's a lot of really unnecessary turnovers. And as you say, when things were running against us, we didn't really have a plan B or a plan C. We didn't see like Amy Atwell thrown in to maybe hit some threes. We were talking before about maybe some screens in the backcourt to help with the backcourt pressure that was so telling from Nigeria. So, yeah, really surprising result. All credit to Nigeria, but, yeah, Australia needs to play a lot better than this if they're going to advance in this tournament.
There's still hope, Tom, but going back to the game and looking at the way that the game played out, 16 turnovers in the first half. Daniel touched on it. A lot of the turnovers were uncharacteristic. Jade Melbourne scored a few points up front, but then gave the ball away a couple of times, including off an inbounds pass, and gave an easy layup. And that kind of set the tone for the rest of that first half, where Nigeria clearly saw something that they really liked in the backcourt and said, we're going to press this team. We're going to make sure that we hawk the ball at every opportunity. The Opals did not know how to handle that sort of ball pressure.
No, and that was really surprising as well because, aside from Jade, who, obviously this is her first Olympics, she's still young. The rest of the Opals guards are experienced. You're talking about Sammy Whitcomb, Tess Madgen, Christy Wallace. They've all been there and done this before. They've all been around the traps and played a number of games at international level. A lot of those players play in the best league in the world and face tough ball pressure every single game. So to really get rattled like this was quite surprising to me. It was almost like Nigeria got in their heads early on in the game, and the Opals could never really counter that. And I think that's the most surprising thing. I mean, you talk about the adjustments that were made or not made during the game. I hate to say this because I have so much respect for Sandy Brondello, but I think she got outcoached in this game quite badly.
Yes.
And I don't think that there was enough kind of counters or trying different things to beat that pressure and try and get some cheap buckets or just get some settling plays here or there. It just seemed like a scramble for the majority of the game. And as a result, the Opals were always under pressure, even when they came back and got within 2 points. Trying to get that tying basket a number of times, there was turnovers, there was missed layups, there was missed free throws. And it was just very, very uncharacteristic.
Daniel, Sandy Brondello has been around a long time, veteran coach, made the WNBA finals previously, and obviously led Australia to a bronze medal in a World Cup. So no slouch, but it did strike me, to echo Tom's comments, that there was no adjustment made, no significant adjustment made as to how the offense was running, how they were moving the ball. Everything looked tentative. Everything looked disjointed. There was no cohesion, as you said earlier, Tom, and the Opals just did not look like a unit that was prepared to play together and win together and had a very clear identity and way that they wanted to trust that they could win.
No, sadly, I think that is really accurate. It was, really hard to get easy buckets all night. There was no kind of plan we could turn to get those cheap buckets. Nigeria contesting everything, just so physical, so intense, all over the court. But we really didn't. We didn't have that plan B, plan C. And at international level, you really need to have those kind of adjustments and adjustments to counter adjustments. It really seemed like we played the one style all night and it wasn't working, and we just kept going back to that well. And we had a good period when Alana Smith was really impacting the game. We had a couple of runs here and there, but we never really looked like winning the game, and that's really surprising to see from this team.
We've got to talk about the positives because there were a couple of positives. Alana Smith was definitely one, Tom, as Daniel mentioned there. 15 points, 7 rebounds, hit a couple of threes, looked really confident when she had the ball. She was shut down a couple of times inside. Nigeria were great at being able to close into space whenever Australia got the ball in the paint. But Alana Smith probably looked at like the most confident offensive player for the Opals.
Yeah, she did. And she's probably the most talented offensive player that we have on the roster right now, if I'm being honest. The form that she showed in the WNBA, both this season and last season, has been great. And they needed kind of more out of her at times, but she gave pretty much all she could. I mean, she was huge, as Daniel said, in that big run to get them back into the game in the third quarter. There was a 10-0 run in the Opals' favor at one point, and Alana capped that with a big three after she blocked a shot down the other end. So she certainly did everything she could, but she was manhandled a lot during this game. We spoke about the physicality. She was knocked around, and I'm not sure she got the support of her teammates enough at times as well. The other player that was interesting to me, and Adam, we spoke about this last night, was Steph Talbot and what sort of role she was going to play. And she was thrust straight into the starting lineup, which, on talent, you can say absolutely that's a natural choice, but on form and preparation, that was an intriguing one to me. And she played huge minutes and obviously had a great impact on the game with 12 boards, 10 assists, 3 steals. But she was 1 of 10 from the field, and she was 0 of 6 to start the game. And she just looked really, really rusty offensively, which is to be expected. my point is, I guess, just expecting that much of a load out of her was, I guess, troubling that we're that reliant on her. And obviously the loss of Beck Allen plays into that. I understand that. How much trust do you put in Izzy Borlase? Do you want to throw an Amy Atwell in the game at that 3 spot, or do you have to go small with Madgen and Wallace as they ended up doing at times? But it was a massive load to try and throw on Steph Talbot, I thought, in her first game back. And, she battled as hard as she could, but there was part of that lack of cohesion offensively was to do with the personnel on the floor at times, I thought, as well. Another odd thing to me was that Sandy went 11 players deep in the first quarter. And she subbed everyone in except for Amy Atwell by the end of the first quarter, which just, I don't know, like, is that part of the game plan? Is that just trying to find an answer? Yeah. So there was some odd decisions tonight.
Daniel, it strikes me that if you're playing 11 players in the first quarter, if you're playing Steph Talbot coming off very little to no preparation with this squad, that just kind of screams a lack of trust to me. It screams that you don't know who your best 5 are. You don't know what your best rotation is, and you're still trying things to try and search and find it, which is, to use Tom's word, troubling. It's really concerning heading into the last 2 group games of this Paris Olympic Games for the Opals, because if they don't find a combination that works and soon, they are on a plane home.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, as you say, 11 players in the first quarter. I mean, we saw players like Kayla George, Mariana Tolo. Tolo had a little bit of an impact defensively, but a lot of those bench players, she was good in limited minutes. A lot of those bench players kind of came in, played a few minutes, weren't able to make a huge amount of impact. And you're right, we do really need to get down to that best kind of 7 or 8 players for the later games in this tournament. And it is a real concern that we're not there yet. It's probably hard to overstate the impact of missing Beck Allen. I mean, there's kind of 28, 30 quality minutes on the wing that we're missing. Obviously, Steph Talbot's missed a lot of basketball recently. As Tom said, like, she really contributed to the game in basically every way except for scoring, playmaking, rebounding, defense. She had a couple of really good steals and deflections, but just couldn't get going offensively, and that was really telling. It is a real concern that we don't have that real tight kind of 7 or 8 player rotation that we have confidence in going forward.
Well, at this time, the Podium Pod is brought to you by Team Feet. Team Feet offers premium athletic socks for modern teams, however they compete. With sweat wicking cotton, arch support, ventilation panels, and compression stitching, Team Feet socks are built to outperform. Whether your team is tiny or 1,000 strong, Team Feet unites and excites your players and supporters with their combination of quality and performance. Join basketball teams around Australia and the world by choosing Team Feet. For designs and worldwide delivery, head to teamfeet.com. Tom, looking forward, we'll look at a couple of comments first. And the first one I want to refer to is thoughts on Lauren Jackson. A comment here from Rely saying bit of a defensive liability, getting behind the player or falling over, leading to open layups. I think that might be a little harsh for me. I think there were a lot of players tonight that struggled defensively against the intensity of Nigeria on both ends. But usually the offense from Nigeria was started by great defense more often than not and getting the Opals on their heels. It struck me on different plays, particularly in inbounds, that the Opals in a half-court set were catching it on their heels. They weren't forward. They weren't able to get any space. They weren't able to get any comfort. Everything was uncomfortable for the Opals tonight, Tom. And, LJ was kind of a symptom of that, where nothing was comfortable for her either.
Yeah, and look, I don't think LJ was the problem defensively. I think it was the team defense, the team schemes that were just a step behind. I think they were late on help coverages. They got put into rotations a number of times by great ball movement from Nigeria. And you have to give the Nigerians a lot of credit for the way they attacked all night long offensively. But you're right, the pressure that was put in, it wasn't just on Lauren Jackson by the Nigerian defense. It was on all of our bigs. And I think they came in with a really clear game plan that they were going to limit the interior presence of our bigs, because that's where the advantage could potentially be for the Opals. There was nothing easy inside, whether it was LJ, whether it was Ezzy Magbegor, who I thought struggled just to get into any kind of rhythm all night long. Obviously, Alana Smith had an impact, but that was probably more from the perimeter and driving to the basket than through. Like she didn't really get much going in the low block. There was always a double team coming. They really wanted to force Australia out to the perimeter, and they closed out really well and they trapped really well. There were a number of times where we were just struggling just to create space and find any kind of decent shot. So you have to give a ton of credit to the way Nigeria came in with their defensive schemes tonight.
Daniel, I want to hone in on Ezi Magbagor because going into this tournament, Ezi was supposed to be one of the leaders of this team, one of the best players on this team, and tonight really struggled. 9 points, 5 boards, 4 turnovers, 4 of 9 from the field. But it was, once again, symptomatic of everything that Nigeria did, where Ezi did not get an easy touch the entire game. She had a body on her at all times. It was physical. It was uncomfortable. And she really struggled with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as you say, absolutely no easy catches, no easy buckets. But yeah, she's a great player. She's a WNBA All-Star, and she's got to the level where she's really experienced at this level. I remember talking to Sandy Brondello after one of the games at the last World Cup, and she was saying that she's just always drilling into Ezi, be assertive. And I thought she'd really kind of taken that on board and stepped up recently. This game was a bit of a setback for her. That was obviously a real focus of the Nigerian team to be physical with her and to body her up every time she got the ball. And yeah, she really kind of struggled to deal with that. She definitely wasn't the worst player out there, but definitely didn't have the impact that we're looking for. We're probably looking for, her to be one of our, best 2 or 3 players. And I thought that the best 2 players on the court tonight were Musa and Tulu. We really need kind of Ezi to be up there with the best player on the court to be winning these tough games.
Now, we don't shy away from talking about difficult topics here on the Podium Pod. And there is one comment I want to refer us to. There was an incident between these 2 teams 3 years ago. And there's a grudge feel to the pressure. Yes, I agree. I think Nigeria set themselves for this game and they came out and they smacked Australia in the mouth. They had an intensity to them. They had a heart to them. They had a motivation to them that I don't think you can understate. I don't think it was the fault of any one of the Opals on the floor that was the case. But I do think we have to reference it. There is a history between these 2 teams, Tom, and you can't put everything down to that, but you can't tell the story of Australia versus Nigeria without referencing the fact that there is a little bit of bad blood there.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt Nigeria was up for this game. You could tell by the way they were playing. You could tell by the way their bench was up and about. You could tell by the intensity of their coach throughout the entire game as well. This was one that they had probably circled as soon as those group drawings were done and looking to get a little bit of revenge for what happened, as you said, 3 years ago. Having said that, though, that doesn't explain the 10 missed free throws. It doesn't explain the 26 turnovers, of which at least half were really soft, inexcusable turnovers. And, if you score on a third or half of those possessions and you make half of those missed free throws, you're still winning the game. Maybe not as comfortably as you would have thought coming in, but you're still winning the game. And that's on Australia, right? So whether they weren't up for it because maybe they didn't think about the mindset that the Nigerians were going to come in with. Maybe that's what they were going to cruise to a win. Or maybe, as I said at the outset, it's just a team that isn't quite there yet in terms of their preparation. It's probably a combination of both of those things, to be honest. But they're going to have to get ready and quickly before their next game against Canada, because that is do or die. And it's a team they can beat. We saw last week, even without a full-strength team, we still almost beat those Canadians in Segovia. But they have to win that game. And not only do they have to win it, but they have to make up some of this 13-point margin they've lost by today as well, because point differential could very much come into play for them.
And let's not forget, Daniel, that after that, they have the home team, France. So this doesn't get easier for the Opals. It gets much, much more challenging. So they have to make statements in these final 2 games. Can you see them being able to come back and have a significant victory against Canada and erase that deficit that was created tonight?
I definitely think it's possible. As Tom said, we matched up pretty well with Canada just a week ago. It's a team we've had, very talented team, but it's a team we have had some success against. I guess going into the tournament, I kind of always penciled in France as a loss and assumed we would win this game and hoped we would win the Canada game. Now it becomes really important that if we lose to France, that it's at least very competitive and we erase some of that margin, because this result really unexpected, and we really need to at worst cling to that third spot in the group.
I hope that comment is from Tasmanian basketball legend Mark Chivers, who has been a fixture down here in Tasmania for quite some time. It's an interesting one. The rotation, we talked about the 11 players in the first term. Jade Melbourne was rather aggressive, and she was taken off at different points there, Tom, which is a little egregious. We have to talk about the fact that, at times Christy Wallace played a lot of point guard in this game. Tess Madgen, not quite as much, but it was interesting to see that Jade Melbourne had a shorter leash potentially than other players for making mistakes. And Sandy, was taking her off in that last term rather than trying to take the game on and maybe get the more talented offensive player out there on the floor.
Yeah, there was a bit of that. And look, Jade looked great for the first few minutes, and then she had 2 really bad turnovers in a row in the first quarter when she was first subbed out of the game. And I think she looked a little tentative for the remainder of the game after that. She was aggressive at times. She was still playing with pace as she does, but there was just a little bit of hesitation, like she didn't want to make another mistake through certain points of the game. And I think that was evident in that second half, which is probably why she wasn't out there on the floor for those last kind of 5 minutes or so. But Jade's a great player, and she'll bounce back, and she's up and about, she's upbeat, she's confident. And they're going to need her to be really good to move forward in this tournament. So I think it's something that she'll learn from. It's her first game at Olympic level. She's not played in a World Cup before. So, you can excuse her a little bit for that. But she's a player that we absolutely need to be firing if this Opals team is going to make any noise in this tournament moving forward.
Yeah, there was a comment, Daniel, about the Opals being perhaps a little too old, but Izzy Ball-Ace, Jade Melbourne kind of counteract that argument a little bit. They're taking one player who started and one player who did play in the rotation tonight that are, future stars. And Alana Smith's still in the prime of her career. Ezzy Magbegor's in the prime of her career. I don't think we can use age as an excuse for anything.
No, I don't think we can use it as an excuse. I do wonder in the big picture if we're a little bit stuck between here, as we've got that kind of LJ, Tolo, Madgen generation, that this will probably almost definitely be their last games. And then you've got the kind of Ball-A's Melbourne generation that are still finding their really super talented players, but still finding their feet at international level. As you say, we've got a couple of players, Alana Smith and Ezzy Magbegor particularly, in the prime of their careers, but probably not a whole lot of players in that age group. We've kind of got a few really young players and a few real veterans. So there probably is a little bit of something in that. We do have probably a lack of players in that kind of late 20s age group where players often hit their real peak. So I wouldn't say we're too old. It's probably a little bit more complicated than that. But there probably is a little bit of something in that the Opals at the moment possibly are a little bit stuck between generations.
Well, we will be with you for the rest of the Paris Olympic Games, regardless of how many games the Boomers play, the Opals play. We will be there straight after every single one of them, and we'll continue that tomorrow night as the Boomers face Canada around 9:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. We'll be with you directly after that game, which will be around 11:30 p.m. tomorrow night, so a late night on the horizon for the Podium Pod. Then we, of course, have the Opals versus Canada on Thursday night, and then the Boomers versus Greece on Friday. And then Monday morning, we finish the group stage with the Opals versus France. That game is at 5 a.m., so the post-game will be at around 7 or so. So please stay with us on YouTube, like and subscribe to our channel here for the Pick and Roll. You can read Tom and Daniel's words at pickandroll.com.au. You can subscribe. Please support the fantastic basketball content that these guys are doing constantly. Tom, first, thanks for joining us on the Podium Pod once again.
I wish we were smiling a bit more on this one, but always good to chat with you, Adam. Thanks for having me again.
And Daniel, thanks for coming on.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much, everyone. Don't forget, like, subscribe to the Podium Pod, the podcast feed, and unwrap the Pick and Roll podcast as well. I'm Adam Webster. Have a great night, and go Boomers, go Opals, go Kangaroos.